Anyway, hey, today we're going to talk about your spiritual battles, but more than that, I want to talk about the God who fights for us, who fights our battles, if we'll just let him. And I think if we really understand that, how much more you could live your life for him if you understand what he wants to do in your life. And does he fight your battles for you? Absolutely, yes, he does. And when you understand that truth, it takes so much more off of you, and you can put so much more in your purpose for God. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. We're going to be in 2 Kings chapter 6, and we'll be reading verses 15 and 16, but I felt like God wanted me to include verse 17, so we're going to do that too. You don't have to put it on the screen if you don't have it, but I'm just telling you, at the very end, I'm going to use a little bit of verse 17. Verse 15 of chapter 2, chapter 2, 2 Kings chapter 6. As you're trying to hear people flipping, so... Hey, you know when you throw a couple of banana peels on the ground, what you have, right? A pair of slippers. All right. It was funny this morning about 5 o'clock. Verse 15, chapter 6, 2 Kings, a lot of numbers. When the servant of the man of God got up, went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. "Oh no, my lord, what shall we do?" the servant asked. "Don't be afraid," the prophet answered. "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." I'm going to go ahead and read verse 17 because I'm going to include that as well. And sorry, Marilyn, I just felt like I should do this. You always put these, you're faithful to put this on here. But I'm going to include that, so if you want to keep reading. Then Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire around Elisha. So today we're going to talk about the battle. And you know, so many people, I'm going to flip my thing here. My wife just finally came in for me, this pad, and I told her I'd try to use it. She ordered it on my birthday many moons ago. Finally got it, but I'm going to try to use it. I think when many of us, when we go through spiritual battles, and I don't mean just, a lot of us go through different kind of battles. Sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's relational, and sometimes the battles we go through are definitely spiritual. But I think when we go through those things, stuff comes up in our lives. I think a lot of times the first reaction we have is, what am I going to do? How am I going to handle this? I don't know what I'm going to do. But you know what? We have to remember that today, God is the one that will. That's what it takes sometimes, because if you are a person that's always thinking, every time something comes up, what oh, that's your opinion. What am I going to do? And they'll give you their opinion. What am I going to do? And they go, oh, that's the opinion I like. That's what I'm going to go with. When all along, you don't have to fight like that, because I'm telling you, if you fight your battles trying to be and do it yourself, you're not going to win. Now, you might have a little contentment for a while, but you're really not going to have victory in your heart, because your heart's never going to be content until you give that over to God. He's the one that gives you contentment in your heart over your battles, because you don't have to fight it. He'll fight it for you. And that's what we need to really look at today, is a God who fights our battles. And I think a lot of people, what they do is they have this mentality of doing it themselves. And what happens is, when you keep doing it yourself, is you lose your focus. And when you lose your focus, you start losing everything else. All the promises that God made, you start forgetting those things because your focus is off. And we have a lot of people who are walking around with their shoulders down and their head down, living in defeat. And they don't have to live in defeat, because Jesus already gave us the victory. But what we do is we forget that, and we have a lot of people who's walking around distracted, down, distraught, whatever you want to say, and they live defeated lives when they don't have to live a defeated life. God did not say Jesus came to give you the defeat. Didn't the Bible plainly say Jesus came to give us the victory? I will not leave you, forsake you. God says, where does my help come from? It comes from Jesus Christ. And we have to remember that so much. much because it's so easy to get distracted in the world that we live in. And you know, in Ephesians chapter 6, it talks about putting on your armor. And you put your armor on for a reason. You put your armor on because of the battle. In fact, what we need to remember is this, is that what is the armor that we put on? Now, you can put on different kinds of armor. When people get angry at you, you can deflect a certain way. You may not deflect the right way. It may be something you're trying to, but this isn't working because it's the wrong armor. And eventually the enemy's going to get through. Because you understand you have a real enemy, right? And it's not somebody that just wants to aggravate you every once in a while. No, you have an enemy, the Bible says, wants to steal, kill, and destroy. None of those things are good things. But it's exactly the real enemy that we have, and we have him every day from sunrise to sunset, sunrise, whatever your sleep schedule is, whenever you're awake, sometimes even when you're asleep. The enemy is real. God knew he's real. But I'm telling you today, the enemy's already been defeated. But I just wonder how many people listen to him anyway. And they walk around defeated because they're trying to put on the wrong armor. When all along, God says this, you need to understand that the real armor that you need is strengthened by me and it's made by me. Now in Ephesians chapter 6, what does it say? Finally be strong, who? In the Lord, in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God. Not of Dave. Not of whoever. Fill your name in on that little blank. Put on the full armor of God. Because that is where your strength is at. That is where the victory is at in your battle, not yourself. Put on the full armor of God, that you may take your stand, and here it is, the real enemy, that you may take your stand against the devil's schemes. And that's what he's scheming all the time for you. And especially if you're in the front lines of the battle. You're living like you're supposed to be living, guess what? You're a target. People say, well, God ain't caring about, or the devil ain't worried about you. No, the devil's worried about you if you're living your purpose. The devil's worried about you if you're doing the will of God in your life. He's worried about it because he wants to try to stop you. And that's what we really need to keep in mind. And if you put on the wrong armor, it's going to cause you problems. And I think if we face whatever it is that we face, most of our battles in life, now somebody might disagree with me, most of your battles in life are caused by a spiritual problem. You think about that just for a minute. Most of your battles are caused by a spiritual problem because the spiritual problem will cause the spiritual or the wrong mindset. And when the devil can get you to be in the wrong mindset, even if it's just for a little bit, he can do a lot of damage. That's why the Bible is so clear. Have this mindset in you, which was also in who? Christ Jesus. Because if you have the mindset the other way, you're going to end up losing the battle you're in. And I think too many times we lose a lot of battles that we don't need to lose. I think we lose a lot of battles that was already won. We just didn't realize it. And we're living like that. But God said, put on the whole armor, his armor. And and here's the amazing thing about the armor of God. And I'm getting to the scripture, trust me. And the reason I'm saying that is this. You remember when David went out and he was about to fight Goliath? Hadn't went out there yet. Saul wasn't really living for God a whole lot then, but what did Saul try to do to him? Hey, put on this armor of mine so you'll be safe. And David tried to put it on, and he walked around. He said, it's heavy, it don't fit. This is not me. But that's why I'm saying you have to be careful to put on the armor of God and not try to do something else because you're going into a battle that God gives you victory. So why not put on the armor of God, strengthened by God? But what happens is he was clumping around that armor, and he was like, that giant's going to, and incidentally, the spear that Goliath had would have went right through that armor. It really wasn't anything protective. It was the wrong stuff. And David took it all off, and he said, this is not where I've had victory in the past. This is not what I have fought with before. It doesn't work for me. It's not mine. This is not the armor that God made for me. And you realize it's something when God says put on the whole armor of God. Guess what? God made it for you. When you put on the armor of God, he made it for you. Because he wanted you to have the victory. And everybody might need just a little bit different size armor, don't they? But David took it all off, and he said, this is not me. He said, my armor isn't even nothing that I wear. My armor is God. And he grabbed a sling, and he had a sling, and he went to the river, and he picked up some rocks, and he said, this is what I fight with. This is where I've had victory over lions and bears and oh my, and all these other things, This is where I've had victory in. And I think too many times what we need to do is we need to stop worrying about everything else and start worrying about what we've had victory in before. And we've had victory in God, so why would I try to go to something else when I've had victory in God? Why would I try to put on something else that doesn't fit when God specifically made some armor for me to have victory in my life? And we face these battles and we go on, but anyway, the amazing part is that God made this, and he said finally, be strong in the Lord and his mighty power. And keep this mindset about you. Because, David, he never forgot what he had victory in. And that's what I mean. When you're in a battle, and there's so many things that are going to distract you in your life. So many people that will try to distract you from the truth. You have to remember where your victory came from. Because I think a lot of times what we do, especially in the world that we live in today, we get so distracted by everything else that we lose focus on what gave us victory in the battle. And then we get defeated, and we walk around like everybody else with our head down going, oh, this is just miserable. Oh, not another day of this. When all along, God said, you don't have to live like that. You don't have to walk around with your shoulders down, your head down, being defeated. I didn't die for you to live defeated. I died so you can have victory. And that's exactly what we need to do, and that's how we need to live. So here we are in the story about Elisha. Now, Elisha came after Elijah. Elisha said, hey, it's kind of ironic. He said, God, I want a double portion. When he took over for Elijah. And Elisha is here, and Elisha has a gift. He's a prophet of God. And in the time frame that he was living, the Armenians, the king of Aram, was trying to defeat Israel. And he had a tactic that he wanted to do by hiding his army in different places. And then when the Israelite army came through, he would try to attack them and kill them. He said, you know what? They'll never see me coming because they'll not know where I'm at. But for some reason, there's this guy named Elisha that kept telling the Israelites where the army's at. And the king of Aram was like, how did they know we were here? We'll go hide over here. So they go there and they hide over here. They said, the Israelites will never know we're over here. We're going to attack them. We're going to kill them. And then Elisha would say, hey, the army of Aram, they're over there hiding, waiting on you. And finally the king of Aram got wind of this and said, how in the world do they always know where we are at before they even get there? Well, they have a guy named Elisha. And for some reason, he's figuring out every place you're at and everything that you're doing. He said, well, that isn't going to work. We got to get rid of it. and trust me, when you're doing what you're supposed to do, the enemy would love nothing better than to get rid of you. And they said, we got to get rid of him because he's being a tattletale. And he's telling all the Israelites where my army is hiding. So if we get rid of him, they won't know anymore. So sure enough, the army went out and they circled the city that Elijah and his servant was at. And they didn't bring just an army. They had the chariots. They had everything. And it wasn't to get anybody else. They wanted Elisha. And his poor servant just happened to be with him. Man, talk about guilt by association. And he was just, I'm just a servant. But they go out, they get up in the morning, they have their donuts, they have their coffee, or bagels, or cheese, whatever it is. Yeah, they have a bagel with cream cheese on it, and a little bit of salmon or something, whatever that is. Anyway, they had this, they went out in the morning, and the servant went out first. And he went out, and that's where we kind of catch verse 15 up. And he goes out, and when the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, the army of horses and chariots surrounded the city. Oh, no. What are we going to do? And he panicked. And Elijah went out, saw the army, and was just like, well, really, what we have is a lot more than what they have. And the servant was like, we're just standing by ourselves. What are you talking about? And Elijah wasn't worried about it. And really, when you think about it, Elijah was doing what? Did he call down and ask God to bring his army? No, he was doing his purpose. He was doing the will of God for his life. He was being exactly the person that God had called him to be. Being a prophet to the people. And his job was not easy to be a prophet because those people were not listening and they were not obeying God. But still, God was faithful. You know, Elijah was faithful to his purpose. He didn't allow a lot of other people's opinions. He didn't allow a lot of people's actions, other people's actions, to regulate what he was doing for God. He was still faithful to do what he's supposed to be doing. And that says a lot about your purpose. Do not let other people distract you away from the purpose God has for you. You know, I think a lot of times what we do, we blame everybody else for us just not being faithful in our purpose for God. And it's not what it's supposed to be. And it's easy to do that, but Elijah, here he goes. He goes out and goes, And he was just faithful to be in his purpose. And he says, doesn't bother me. God's got a lot more than that. But you see the difference there. What each and one of them were focused on. You see, one was focused on the battle, one was focused on the purpose. One was focused on the battle, the other was focused on what his will was, or what God's will was for his life. And you've seen a completely different reaction. Isn't that funny how when you start focusing on the wrong thing, your reaction starts being the wrong thing? And when you start worrying about everything else except the will of God, everything else will start consuming your life to the point where you start going, oh no. You know, Elijah went out and he was pretty confident. He knew what he had. He knew the Lord fought his battles for him. He didn't have to focus on the battle. That wasn't his issue at all. His whole thing was, I'm going to keep doing the will of God. Where you see the servant was completely different. And I would wonder, how many times have we been the servant and how many times have we been Elijah? How many times have we looked at the battle and it just scares us to death? How many times have we looked at the battle and we felt defeated before it even started? You realize how many times that people have been defeated and the enemy didn't even have to raise a finger. All he had to do was just make it look like you were going to get defeated. And there was not even the first fiery dart thrown. But because you were focused on the wrong thing, it worked. And we just, oh, no, done again. When all along, we need to be like Elijah. And Elijah said, I don't care how many people they got. Yeah, they've got these chariots out there. They got these big guys with swords and all this stuff. And here I am with my little robe. But I've got a lot more than that. I've got a whole lot more than that because I've got the God of the universe on my side. Those guys are nothing. He said, all I have to do is keep doing my purpose. I'm not going to quit being a prophet because of that. And that's really what we have to look at today, though. Really, we have to understand if you're focused on the battle, that's what your life is going to be like. Always in a battle. And trust me, if you start trying to focus on your battle, live your battle in your own strength, you are going to get tired. You are going to get weary. Because you're trying to do it yourself. You're doing it the wrong way. When all along, you need to be like Elijah and say, you know what? I'm just going to keep doing my purpose. That's all I'm responsible for. I'm not responsible for the victory. I'm responsible for doing God's will. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Be responsible just in your purpose, doing God's will, because the battle is won. You realize that, we've talked about it already a little bit, you realize that the enemy that you face in your battles, he's already defeated. Before you were ever born, he was defeated. Before your parents were ever born, he was defeated. Before your grandparents, and we could go on and on and on down the line. It was already defeated when Jesus said what? It's finished. Battle's won. And that's what we need to live like. And if you're just like Elijah, even in your purpose, you understand that God is fighting for you. And that's what I wanted to also bring up. And that's why I brought up verse 17. We could stop right now and be done. But in verse 17 it says what? He says, Elijah prayed, open his eyes, talking about his servant, so that they may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes and looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots, and they were afire. This wasn't just like the chariots that the king Aram brought. These were some big ones, and they were fire, and there was all kinds of people, and there was a whole lot more of them than there was of the Armenian army. And Elijah said, open his eyes, Lord, so he can see. And he prayed that. And the servant's eyes were open, and he looked at Elijah, and when he saw something he didn't see before. He saw all these fiery chariots, and he was like, wow, you ain't just kidding. You do have a lot more. And it's real. And that's what I want to also bring up, though, that, a lot of times, if you are focused on knowing you have the victory, if you are focused, just like Elisha, on your purpose, you won't focus on your problems for yourself all the time. You see what I'm saying? Sometimes it's very easy to get focused on me and what's wrong with me and what's wrong with my life to the point where we start forgetting about everybody else around us. And that's not what Jesus did. You look at Jesus on the cross. At what time did he say, ouch, Lord, just get me off this? No, he was always, even when he was doing that, he was doing the will of God, but he was always worried about the people around him and what was going to happen in their life and to encourage them. And that's what I want you to see today. If you are concentrating on the victory that God has given you, you will be an encourager. Because that's exactly what Elisha was trying to do. He wanted his servant to see what God was really all about. And he wanted to encourage him. Look, I'm not standing here by myself. I have so much more. And he encouraged him in his desperation. There was a servant, and he was like, oh no, and he was in a panic, and he had all these problems. Elijah wasn't worried, so what did Elijah do? He didn't say, well, I'm not worried about it. I do this, I do that. No, he encouraged the servant. And he prayed. He didn't just try to say, oh, it's going to be all right, buddy. We're good. Smack, smack, smack. Give him that bro pat in the back. Oh, it'll be okay. No, he prayed, Lord. Prayed, Lord, open his eyes. Help him to see you like I see you. Lord, I'm praying. Help him to see the victory that you have already given me. That's how you encourage people. Lord, help him to understand that he is not by himself today. We're not just standing here. You're standing there with us. The whole thing about God said, I won't leave you, forsake you, it's more than something you put on a t-shirt. It's real. Okay. Good. But what I'm saying is this. I have found in my life, especially just here lately, that the best way for me to quit focusing on the battle is for myself, is to encourage someone else in the battle, when they're in the battle. And there's plenty of people around you that are in battles. There's plenty of people around you who are discouraged. There's plenty of people around you who have lost hope. And I don't want us to be a people walking around without hope. We have the greatest hope ever. So why do people need to walk around being discouraged and not encouraged? Because I wonder how many of us are just like the servant when Elijah's saying, hang on a second, I'm going to pray for this guy. He's going to see really what God's all about. And pray for them. And he didn't say, well, Lord, I hope someday you work in his life. No, he said, God, I want him to see it right now. Help him to see what I see. God, help him be encouraged like I'm encouraged. God, help him to see the victory and know the victory for sure, just like I see the victory. That's how you encourage somebody. That's how you really, really encourage somebody. So what are you doing today? Are you putting armor on because of your talent, your ambition, and your strength, or are you putting it on because of God's strength? The armor that God gives you. Are you putting on the right armor? Are you walking, clanking around, wondering how you can't fight this way? Well, go by what God has done in your life before. And know that he's going to give you the victory in that. What about that? And what about encouragement? Are we going to be like Elijah or like the servant? Focus on ourselves and our problems when we should be focused on that we already have the victory? Or are we going to focus on God and focus on his will? You understand that unless you focus on the victory that God's already given you, you're never going to fulfill the will he has for your life. Because you're always going to be focused on something else. Always that defeat. Always that hopelessness. Always that badness or whatever. I'm sorry, Daniel. I know English teachers. I'm sorry. Badness is a... Anyway. Yeah. But my point is this, is that are you focused on the victory today? Because God has already given you the victory. It's already there. You don't have to focus on the problem. You don't have to focus on the battle anymore because the battle's already won. I mean, you think about like people that have fought battles in the past. They don't go on an empty battlefield and grab their sword and say, okay, I'm ready. The battle's over. It's already won. It's done. You just need to keep focusing on the purpose that God has for you now. Man, can you imagine if everybody in the kingdom of God, right now, living, would stop worrying about the battle and start worrying about doing a purpose for the Lord? That would be amazing, wouldn't it? But that's what we need to do. That's what we need to be about. Because you have an enemy that's real, but he's a defeated enemy. You have a battle, a spiritual battle that's real, but it's not of flesh and blood, and it's already won. But you have a God who has given you a purpose. A God who has given you a will for your life. That's what we need to worry about today. That's what we need to concentrate on because God's already won for you. We're going to take just a second and close our eyes and bow our heads. And I just want you to think about, is there something that you're not giving to God? Is there some battle that you are not giving to God today? I don't know what it is. Maybe it's an anger issue. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a jealousy issue. Maybe it's a lust issue. Whatever it is. Have you given it to God? Because that's already been won for you. And let's begin to be people who are focused on God's will, God's purpose. And let's move on from there. We're going to take just a second. Let the Holy Spirit speak to your life. And whatever He brings up in your life, you say, yes, Lord, I'm giving that to you today. I'm giving you that because I know the victory. And then we'll have a hymn of invitation. It'll be your chance to come up and pray.